one of the reasons why I wanted to hone in on your, background is because I think right now there are still a lot of industrial designers in the market that are trained like product design, right?
Yeah,
and we want to get into UX, right? But they don't know how. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between industrial design skill sets versus user experience? Like, what are their similarities and differences, and how to make the first step?
That's a good one. So there are similarities and there are definitely differences. The similarity is the overview of how your brain works in terms of starting with empathy and defining the problem, ideating, and then prototyping and testing. The design thinking process is in parallel.
Yeah.
I would say for industrial designers to go into UI UX space is probably easier than the reversal. I know little to none that has made where you're a UI UX person and you went to industrial design.
Right.
But I've seen architects or industrial designers moving into the UI UX space. So in the big area of design, I say is very similar. How you do research, how you understand personas and user profiles, the methodologies of design is similar.
Okay.
The technical space is very different.
Okay. Can you talk about the skill sets needed?
The skill sets, actually, some of them are migratable from industrial design, but it's a different type of focus. So I say in design, we govern several attributes from the core. You have an expertise in aesthetics, the perception of beauty. You more or less govern craftsmanship, how things are made, put together, how well they're put together, the dexterity that requires the assembly of your design. And that constitutes to the overall quality. But then in between that, there's usability. And the usability, different from user experience, the usability of the different components making up the design is different. And I'm talking about elements, elements making the design. So say, for instance, industrial design is form-driven, it's physical. So immediately that is the difference where the touch points and the process of creation requires you to jump in between 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional. So the production space is also very different from the conceptual space. So in conceptual space, you're sketching, you're CADing, you are, maybe writing, and then when you go into the physical space, you are shaping and you're forming it. The actual manufacturing production is remote from the creator. It is somewhere else. It's maybe in China or somewhere away from. But 3D printing, and of course, it's changing. But I would still say that you need to make the transition from 2D to 3D, and often back and forth. For UX, it's more around cognitive, where we're thinking about the user stories. You're defining the user flow. You're creating information architecture so that you can create this journey. And when you create the journey, then you define the visual elements, how does the actual visual engagement looks and feel like, and then you prototype, and the production space in the agile backend, or when you enter sprint, is actually could be in the same environment. You know, if you code, you could be doing it all in the same screen. And so I think that's the core difference. Manufacturers of physical products is tool and die in a very different environment, requires large physical space.
Right.
For UI UX, you know, you could code on an iPad, and yeah, and you know, you could execute your product, launch it, sell it, all in the same environment. And I think for industrial designers, that is pretty hard to grasp.
Okay. Well, if it's the user experience of IoT, it also involves the physical aspect of the.
Yes. So IoT is somewhat in between, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So IoT is where I need the software before the hardware.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's also the sequence that people often don't understand. If I want to design a button on the industrial design that says on off, I need to know that there's a button to turn on off, and I need to know, okay, say for instance, it's for turning on off Bluetooth. So I need the hardware to work before I have the button to work.
Yes.
So it's the software, and then the hardware, and then the industrial design. So they need to work together. For instance, we're working on different technologies right now. I can't mention too much of it, but they require us to constantly rethink, how does it influence the physical aspect if I choose this type of technology, which has limitations. So this is why your iPhone has a band around the aluminum housing, because when you integrate Wi-Fi, Wi-Fi could not go out of a metal housing. So you need a band around so that the signal could go through. Now, for those that don't design a connected product, you would never think that, oh, this is not just an aesthetic element. This is actually an element.
So it serves a function.
Yeah, so they are interconnected, but it requires deep team collaboration to uncover these issues before. Just imagine, like, if the teams don't talk and you launch a product, it's like, oh, I thought all I need to do is put all the technology, but in reality, as the technology has perimeters that all the stakeholders of the functions needs to be aware of. Yeah.
So for people, because we've seen a lot of people who wants to do career change from industrial design to UX. What's your best recommendation for them to do? Like, where do they gain this knowledge apart from going back to school for a master's degree? You know?
Yeah. So I can't say I went to UI UX school, but I would say don't let UI UX scare you. You've lived with digital products all your life. You know, like if you've used a computer, you've used software. You lived with the evolution of Windows and Mac, the evolution from, you know, a key phone to a smartphone, to how products are now digital and physical. And I think that was that was the biggest issue.
Where did you learn
all the product designers? Sorry.
Where did you learn all the methodologies though?
So the methodologies apply from your industrial design education, I have to say.
Yeah.
Or,
I mean, for
I felt
customer
that,
journey, like user journey is less in industrial design, right? And interaction flow and, you know, wireframing and all these.
So I say it is less because of the maturity of either the designer or the environment that they worked in that didn't enable them to get a better understanding and to how to engage with the customer. It doesn't have to be. I would say I design a physical product in a very similar manner than I design a digital product, where I still need to understand who I'm looking to design for. What is your solution statement in the context of the segmentation, or in the specific context of use. So all of these things are still very applicable.
Okay.
And yeah.
So we've heard in the market, because we run IXDA, Interaction Design Association in Hong Kong, right? So there are many employers who are looking for UX people, but we constantly hear that they say it's very hard to find experienced people, right? Especially in Hong Kong and China, mainland China. But then at the same time, there are a lot of people who wants to get into the industry, right? So there sounds to me there's a market gap going on. So what are the kind of skill sets that you're looking for when you're hiring?
Good question. So I think there are lots of people looking to get into the job as true. You scroll through job sites and you see a flourish of people looking for UI UX. But maybe I think people can't find them. They're either taken or they're not connecting in the right way. So people that have done UI UX for a long time typically come from the web space. They were called the web designer.
Yeah.
Right. So I think web designer was more of a common term maybe 20 years ago. Every web designer I know as a UI UX designer or an interaction designer. And they overlap in various ways. But if you think about the space or this career path, it's relatively young. UI is relatively young. As a label, not as a career path. I think the skill set and the people doing it existed long ago. The label is new. I would say that it happened, holy cow, in the Atari days, where you started to create and provide a digital interface. So I think people exist. You just need to move away from the label of UI UX and look at the skill sets and how they have worked in the past. So that, yeah.
Can you mention like the top 3 skill sets that you're looking for?
So for a UI UX designer, there's the hard skills and the soft skills.
Okay.
So I'd start with the hard skills because people are probably more curious around, what tools should I learn and so forth. So, you either know some sort of UI interfacing skills like Sketch, InVision, Adobe XD. I think some people still do Illustrators. But those are some of the, some of the other hard skills. I do see a lot more people getting into the technical space for UI UX. So full stack, where they also do some coding for front end. And that is highly valued. Now, again, going back to industrial design, it is almost normal for an industrial design to do some level of intuitive engineering. Like you just need to know how your components come together. I find that UI UX is not in that space as much. Where I find a lot of the UI UX designers, they do a lot of journey and research, but they don't do the technical aspect. So it is a pure handoff. Okay. And often they don't have a good understanding of the feasibility.
Okay.
And so what I would be looking for is, well in advance that is feasible. Right. This is how you can represent to the organization that you are more mature in the proposition that you create. It's not just flair; it can be real.
Right.
And of course, conceptually, we can all think outside of the box, but eventually, you're also responsible to become reality. Like that's what we do. We make it real. Otherwise, it's just a form of art that have limited capacity to use. Sorry, that didn't come out right. Art has lots of capacity to use, but in production use. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms
sorry,
of soft skills,
to add one more, the soft skills. Now, the soft skills are actually more important than hard skills.
Okay.
So I was listening to a podcast, Joshua Seedon, by Design Better podcast, and he was talking about outcome versus output, and in that world where we need designers to not just be the masters of screens, them to also lead. We need them to facilitate in a team environment. Need them to help collaboration and to help idea generation, to get different ideas out so that you embellish the final offering and get alignment. To help build empathy, to help other peoples that were non-design stream driven to understand why we do things the way we do, like taking them to a user research session to see through the same lens and understand, why design is done that way rather than being. Yeah.
So would you say communication skills? Yeah. Is it like convincing, like persuasion skills?
Yes. So these interpersonal skills are not really written on a resume that I could get out of, a couple of hours or a day worth of chat. Really has to do with, this person's level of engagement with human beings.
Yeah.
Because design is an activity for human beings, right?
I think that is one key point that usually designers miss because they think their portfolio will get the job.
Yeah.
What are the major skills that they're missing that you find when you interview candidates nowadays?
So let's start with the portfolio. I think a lot of people doesn't put enough emphasis on the portfolio. A portfolio that only shows you very finished products is a pretty bad one, because a portfolio that doesn't tell me how you work is a red flag. I think maybe as an introduction, you can talk about your final outcome, but during an interview per se, employer is really looking for how I will work with you in the future. And so hopefully the pieces that communicates in the portfolio also articulates you as a person, your values, and how you work and how you enjoy certain things, what are your weak spots, and so it is a part of you.
Yeah, so they have to lay out their whole design process, right? From beginning, how they came up with that idea, and then finally the great looking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for example, a lot of people emphasize sketching as an element that is important. Why is it important though? It is not about how well you sketch, like how nice the lines look and how clean they are or how presentable they are. It is how you think. And if you can communicate low fidelity, which sketching is a low fidelity output, that means you are interactive as a person. And you are a revealed person where I would do all the work and I show you the last minute. So I was also listening to someone say that the expectation of someone taking away the work for 2 weeks is very different from someone that shows something after half an hour or 15 minutes. Sketching enables that. So if I have regular sketching and regular interaction, that means you're very close to being in the collaboration area.
Yeah. So really, sketching is a communication tool, you know, among team members, right? Yeah. It's very true. I think a lot of times designers actually don't even know that, you know, these kind of soft skills are needed to find a job, right? A good job, right? Yeah. Okay. So sketching, communication, persuasion, you know, facilitation, right? That is what I'm hearing. Okay. Awesome. Yeah. And and especially in mainland China, I mean, I was pretty shocked to find out that a lot of industrial designers in mainland China, they pay a lot of money for coaching on how to sketch to get into universities.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's not about the thinking
in the wrong way. I think so. The China learning education system has a very unique way of learning where they pride on learning the difficult aspects first. So the assumption is that if you can do the difficult part, then you can do it all. And the issue with that is that you remove the contextual aspect of learning out of that. It is if that, then this, you know. So meaning, if I can sketch very well of this, doesn't necessarily mean I could do other things as well. This is true for driving skills. Going into a driving school, you're taught to learn how to park, parallel park. You have to reverse park in a beam where your wheels have to be perfectly aligned and roll onto these metal bars. And if you slip, you fail. Sketching is also one thing. Like I know someone that is teaching in the Chengdu University, and she was using some examples of what to use for practice sketching. And at the time, she was using one of my vacuum cleaners, because a vacuum cleaner is relatively hard to sketch. You know, practice the oval, or practice the different silhouettes on geometry, because there's a lot of ergonomics involved. There's a lot of assembly of architecture involved. So it's not the easiest thing to draw, but that won't help you in the UI UX space. Learning how to draw a vacuum cleaner and learning how to draw a screen, for instance, is completely different, like just completely different. The UI UX designer is drawing so that I can get to, I could navigate the user. It's more about navigation, usability, the flow, and less about how the line looks, well, there are some, oh yeah, it's the right radius or the wrong radius.
Yeah, it's how the experience like unfolds over time, right?
Yeah. So I would say for those people learning how to sketch, learn the fact that it's a communication tool, and effective sketching is effective communication, meaning I would hardly need some text, a picture would be 1,000 words. So you're drawing it in the way that I understand the problem that you're trying to solve. So storyboarding, for instance, drawing scenarios, instead of writing it, I can now illustrate it. So that is where the value of drawing and sketching is. Of course, there are different fidelity of sketching. You can sketch very high fidelity and it looks fairly real. I have worked with some designers that can draw and it looks real. It's really good. And so that is more of an industrial design realm.
Okay.
UX, the high fidelity is almost always going to be driven by the software rather than the hand manual